Adolf Hitler remains one of the most notorious figures in modern history. His name is synonymous with the atrocities of World War II and the Holocaust. But how did this failed artist from Austria rise to become the Führer of Nazi Germany and ultimately lead his nation to ruin? Imagine a regime so evil that it murdered millions of its own citizens. Imagine a war so devastating that it left tens of millions dead and much of a continent in ruins. Imagine a single man at the center of it all, driving his nation and the world to the brink of destruction. This is the story of Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Nazi Germany, and it is a story that still has the power to shock and horrify us today. Hitler's early years. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town on the border between Austria and Bavaria. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official with a strict and domineering personality. Young Adolf often clashed with his father and found solace in his mother, Clara. As a student, Hitler was an indifferent scholar, but demonstrated an early talent for drawing. After his father's death in 1903, Hitler pursued his dream of becoming an artist, moving to Vienna in 1908 with the aim of attending the prestigious Vienna Academy of Fine Arts. However, he was rejected twice, a bitter disappointment that he would later cite as a crucial turning point in his life. Without a steady income or a clear direction, Hitler spent the next few years in Vienna living a bohemian lifestyle, often in homeless shelters. It was during this time that he was exposed to the antisemitic writings that were widespread in Vienna, which significantly influenced his worldview. Hitler also became fascinated with German nationalism, particularly the idea of a greater Germany that would unite all German-speaking peoples. When World War I broke out in 1914, Hitler enthusiastically enlisted in the Bavarian army, finding a sense of purpose and camaraderie that had been missing in his life. The rise of the Nazi Party. Germany's defeat in World War I came as a profound shock to Hitler and many other Germans. The harsh terms of the Versailles Treaty, which required Germany to accept full responsibility for the war, make significant territorial concessions, and pay massive reparations, left many Germans feeling humiliated and resentful. In this climate of discontent, Hitler found his calling as a political agitator. After the war, Hitler returned to Munich and joined the German Workers' Party, a small nationalist group that espoused a mix of German pride, antisemitism, and anti-communism. Hitler's oratorical skills and passionate delivery quickly made him a star within the party. By 1921, he had assumed leadership of the party, which was soon renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short. The early 1920s were a tumultuous time in Germany, marked by economic crisis, political assassinations, and attempted coups. In November 1923, Hitler and his Nazi associates attempted to seize power in Munich in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The coup attempt failed. Hitler was arrested and imprisoned. However, he used his trial as a platform to spread his message, portraying himself as a patriotic German standing up against a corrupt system. While in prison, Hitler also wrote the first volume of his autobiographical manifesto, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, which outlined his political ideology and future plans for Germany. The path to dictatorship. After his release from prison, Hitler resolved to pursue power through legal, electoral means rather than force. The onset of the Great Depression in 1929 provided the perfect opportunity for Hitler's message to resonate with the German public. As unemployment soared and economic insecurity gripped the nation, more and more Germans turned to the Nazi Party, attracted by Hitler's promises to restore Germany's greatness, provide employment, and combat the perceived threat of communism. In the 1932 elections, the Nazis became the largest party in the German parliament, though they did not win an outright majority. This put Hitler in a strong position to demand the chancellorship, which he was eventually granted in January 1933 by President Paul von Hindenburg. Once in power, Hitler moved quickly to consolidate his position. He persuaded the parliament to grant him emergency powers, effectively allowing him to rule by decree. He banned other political parties and sent his opponents to concentration camps. After President Hindenburg's death in 1934, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, assuming the title of Führer and Reichskanzler, Leader and Reichschancellor. This completed Hitler's transformation from democratic politician to dictator. He now had unchecked power over the German state. Rearmament and expansion. With his power secure, Hitler set about implementing his long-held vision for Germany. This included the rejuvenation of the German economy, the establishment of a racially pure Volksgemeinschaft, people's community, and the expansion of German territory. Central to these aims was the rapid rearmament of Germany, in direct violation of the restrictions imposed by Versailles Treaty. Hitler introduced conscription in 1935 and began to rapidly build up the German military. He also pursued an aggressive foreign policy designed to overturn the Versailles settlement and expand German power in Europe. In 1936, Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland, a region bordering France that had been demilitarized under the Versailles Treaty. This bold move was a significant gamble, as the French had the military power to easily defeat the Germans at this point, but they chose not to intervene. Emboldened by this success, Hitler turned his attention to Austria, his native country. In March 1938, German troops marched into Austria, which was annexed into the Reich in what became known as the Anschluss. Next on Hitler's list was Czechoslovakia. In the Munich Agreement of September 1938, the leaders of Britain, France, and Italy agreed to Hitler's demands to annex the Sudetenland, the German-speaking border regions of Czechoslovakia, in return for a promise of peace. However, less than a year later, in March 1939, Hitler violated this agreement by occupying the rest of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France, realizing that appeasement had failed, now pledged to defend Poland, which seemed to be Hitler's next target. Indeed, on September 1, 1939, German troops invaded Poland, triggering declarations of war from Britain and France. World War II had begun. The tide turns. The early years of World War II saw a string of stunning successes for Hitler's Germany. Using the tactic of blitzkrieg, or lightning war, German forces quickly overran much of Western Europe in 1940, humiliating the once great powers of France and Britain. However, Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941 would prove to be a turning point in the war. Operation Barbarossa, as the invasion was codenamed, caught the Soviets by surprise and made swift initial progress. However, the vast distances, harsh weather, and determined Soviet resistance gradually slowed and then halted the German advance. The Battle of Stalingrad, which raged from August 1942 to February 1943, saw the Germans suffer a devastating defeat, with an entire army group surrendering. Meanwhile, Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 brought the United States into the war, a development which Hitler welcomed at first, but would come to regret deeply. American industrial might and manpower would prove decisive in the war. In North Africa, British forces inflicted a major defeat on the famed German Afrika Korps, led by General Erwin Rommel, at the Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942. As the war turned against Germany, Hitler became increasingly unstable and divorced from reality. He refused to trust his generals, often micromanaging military decisions. His uncompromising stance also prevented any possibility of a negotiated peace. Even as German cities were reduced to rubble by Allied bombing and German forces were driven back on all fronts, Hitler insisted that victory was still possible. D-Day and defeat. The beginning of the end for Hitler's Reich came on June 6, 1944, with the Allied landings in Normandy, France. This massive operation, involving over 150,000 troops on the first day, opened a long-awaited second front in Western Europe. Despite determined German resistance, Allied forces broke out of their beachhead and began to drive towards Germany. On the Eastern Front, Soviet forces launched a series of offensives that pushed the Germans out of the Soviet Union and back towards Berlin. By early 1945, it was clear that Germany was facing inevitable defeat. Many of Hitler's closest associates urged him to leave Berlin for the relative safety of the Bavarian Alps, but he was determined to stay in the capital. In his final days, Hitler retreated to his bunker deep under the Reich Chancellery building in central Berlin. There, he continued to issue orders for increasingly fantastical counterattacks, refusing to accept the reality of the situation. As Soviet troops fought their way into the heart of Berlin, Hitler prepared for his own end. On April 30, 1945, with Soviet soldiers just a few hundred yards from the bunker, Hitler committed suicide, shooting himself with a pistol. His body was burned in a shell crater outside the bunker entrance. With Hitler's death, the last resistance of the Nazi regime crumbled. On May 7, Germany surrendered unconditionally to the Western Allies, followed by a separate surrender to the Soviets on May 9. The war in Europe, which had cost millions of lives and left much of the continent in ruins, was finally over. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please consider leaving a comment to share your reflections. And if you want to learn more about pivotal moments in world history, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos. Thank you for watching.